I remember the exact moment everything changed. A nurse burst through the hospital room door, eyes wide with panic. "Your son just walked out the front door with a woman." I jumped up. "What? What woman?" But she was already running down the hallway. I rushed after her, heart slamming against my ribs. Outside, the parking lot was empty. No sign of Luca. No woman. Just wind and silence. I screamed his name. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed. I grabbed it with shaking hands. The screen lit up with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "If you want your son back, don't call the police." For a second, I couldn't move. My 6-year-old was gone, taken, and someone was watching me. My name is Raylan. I'm a single mom, and I'd give my life for my son. His name is Luca. Curious, kind-hearted, a little stubborn, and the best part of every single day. We were visiting my father, Elijah, in the hospital. He's sick, dying actually, and I wanted Luca to spend as much time with him as possible. I never thought a simple visit would turn into the worst day of my life, and I definitely never expected that my father's past would come crashing back in a way that would threaten everything I love. Let me tell you what happened. It was a Saturday morning like any other. I had packed Luca's favorite snacks in his little blue backpack and made sure his stuffed dinosaur, Rexy, was tucked under his arm before we left the house. He never went anywhere without it. He sat in the back seat, kicking his feet and humming the theme from his favorite cartoon, completely unaware of how heavy my heart felt that day. We were on our way to Mercy Pines Hospital to visit my father, Elijah. He was in the palliative care wing, stage 4 lung cancer. The diagnosis had come just 3 months earlier, and it hit hard. I grew up thinking my dad was invincible. He built houses with his hands. He once pulled a man from a car wreck on the side of the highway without hesitation. Seeing him now, small and pale under stiff hospital blankets, didn't feel real. I made a choice early on not to keep the truth from Luca. I told him Grandpa was very sick, and we had to visit him as much as we could. Luca didn't really understand what dying meant, but he knew Grandpa was different. He knew these visits were important. That morning, as we walked through the hospital doors, the air was thick with that sterile smell, bleach and latex. It always made my stomach tighten. The receptionist at the front desk gave me a tired smile. We had become familiar faces there. Elijah's room was in the corner of the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet. Nurses moved like ghosts. Machines beeped softly behind closed doors. I held Luca's hand tightly as we walked, my free hand clutching a coffee I'd barely touched. When we got to the room, my dad was awake. His breathing was labored, and there were dark circles under his eyes, but he smiled the moment he saw Luca. "Hey, little man," he said, his voice gravelly. "You brought Rexy again?" "Of course," Luca said proudly. "Rexy never misses a visit." I helped him up onto the bed, and he nestled against my dad's side like he had since the first visit. Watching them together brought this deep ache into my chest. It felt like something beautiful slipping through my fingers. My dad looked at me over Luca's head and said softly, "Thanks for bringing him. I know this isn't easy." I nodded. "I just want him to have time with you." Real time, Elijah rested a frail hand on Luca's back. "He's a good kid. Got your stubborn streak." "He's everything," I said. "He's all I've got." There was a long silence after that, the kind where the unsaid things feel heavier than what's spoken. My dad cleared his throat and looked out the window. "I've been thinking a lot lately about things I should have done differently," he said. "Don't," I told him. "You were there when it mattered. That's what counts." Luca broke the moment with a whisper. "Grandpa?" "Yeah, buddy? You're not going anywhere, right?" Elijah looked at him and forced a smile. "Not today." Luca seemed satisfied with that answer. He slid off the bed and started digging through his backpack. "Can I go to the bathroom by myself?" he asked. I looked at him, hesitating. "You sure you know where it is?" "It's just down the hall, I remember." I glanced at my dad, then back at Luca. He was trying so hard to be independent, and I didn't want to embarrass him. I gave in. "Okay, but no talking to strangers. Come right back. If you get confused, ask a nurse." "I got it, Mom," he said, already out the door. I stood up to follow, just to watch him walk to the end of the hall, but Elijah reached for my hand. "He'll be fine," he said. I smiled faintly and sat back down. You're probably right, he's just small. We sat quietly for a while. My dad closed his eyes, breathing slow and deep. I looked around the room. The family photo I brought last week was still on the nightstand. Luca's drawing of a dragon hung on the wall above his bed. I noticed how worn the sheets looked. I noticed how pale my dad's fingers had become. And I noticed the clock. 10 minutes had passed, then 15. I stood up, my heart starting to beat faster. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, hearing in both directions. There was no sign of Luca, and that was when everything started to unravel. I walked quickly down the hallway, glancing into open doors, scanning faces, listening for the soft, high-pitched voice I knew better than my own. There was no sign of Luca. I passed the nurse's station and asked if they had seen a little boy, 6 years old, curly dark hair, wearing a red hoodie with a cartoon dinosaur on the front. One nurse furrowed her brow. He was just in the hallway a few minutes ago. He said he was going to the bathroom. I nodded. He didn't come back. It's been almost 20 minutes. She stood and motioned to another nurse. We'll check the bathrooms and the common areas. He couldn't have gone far. I tried to stay calm, to believe she was right. Hospitals have cameras, security. There's only so many places a 6-year-old can wander. But something in my chest was beginning to twist in a way I couldn't control. 2 minutes later, the same nurse came running down the hallway toward me. She was pale, her voice sharp and panicked. He just walked out the front door with a woman. Everything inside me stopped. What woman? Who? Did she work here? I don't know. She wasn't in scrubs. I just saw them heading toward the exit. I thought she was family. I didn't wait for anything else. I ran. Down the hallway, past the elevators, through the lobby. My shoes squeaked across the polished floor as I pushed through the automatic doors and burst outside. The parking lot was nearly empty. There was no sign of Luca. No woman, no red hoodie, nothing. I stood there, chest heaving, eyes scanning every direction. A man loading groceries into his trunk looked over at me, confused. A delivery driver leaned against his van, staring at his phone. I shouted my son's name. Luca! No answer. I sprinted around the side of the building, checked behind bushes, looked into parked cars. My vision blurred. My thoughts turned wild. What if someone drove away with him? What if he got into a car thinking it was mine? I ran back inside, straight to the front desk. My son just walked out of this hospital. Someone took him. The receptionist's eyes widened. We'll call security. No, I said, gripping the counter. Call the police. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket with shaking hands. A text message. Unknown number. If you want your son back, don't call the police. I froze. My stomach dropped. It felt like the air around me turned thick and heavy. The receptionist kept talking, asking questions I couldn't process. The nurse behind her was calling someone on the hospital phone, but all I could hear was the pulse in my ears and the single sentence on the screen in front of me. This wasn't a child wandering off. This was a kidnapping. Someone planned this, and they knew me. The message wasn't random. It was personal. It was targeted. Someone had watched us, known Luca's name, his habits, how to lure him away. I hadn't seen a stranger in the hallway, no one out of place. Whoever it was, they knew how to blend in. I stepped back, heart racing, brain struggling to find a next move. I had to stay calm. I had to think. I couldn't call the police. Not yet. Not if it meant putting Luca in more danger. I opened the text again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should I respond? Ask who they were? Where he was? But something told me that whoever sent this didn't want to talk. They wanted control, and I couldn't give them more of it. I forced myself to breathe. I needed information, I needed help, but not the kind that would trigger a reaction from someone dangerous. I called my sister, Naomi. She picked up on the first ring. Naomi, it's Luca. Someone took him from the hospital. What? Raylan, what are you saying? I got a message. They said not to call the police. She was silent for a second, then calm. Okay, send me your location. I'm on my way. I hung up and stood alone in the middle of the hospital lobby, people moving around me like I didn't exist. I felt cold. My son was gone, and someone was playing a game with my life. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they wanted. But I knew I had to get him back, no matter what it took. I sat in the corner of the hospital's family room with the lights dimmed low, staring at the message on my phone. I read it again and again, hoping it would somehow change, hoping I had misunderstood it. If you want your son back, don't call the police. Naomi arrived within 20 minutes. She didn't speak at first. She just sat beside me and put a hand on my back. I didn't realize how tense I had been until that moment. My muscles ached from clenching. My throat felt dry from holding back screams. I had never felt so powerless. I handed her my phone. This came in right after they said he walked out with someone. She read the message, then looked at me. They're watching. I nodded. Or they were. I don't know where they are now. Naomi took a breath. You need to decide what to do next. Are you going to listen to them? I don't know, I said. If they're serious, if I call the police, what if something happens to Luca? Naomi didn't argue. She knew that fear. She had 2 kids of her own. She just reached into her bag, pulled out a second phone, and handed it to me. Use this. Let's not take chances with yours. We sat there in silence for a moment until I said the words out loud for the first time. I think this has something to do with Dad. Naomi turned to me. Why would you say that? Because none of this makes sense. Someone took Luca from a hospital in broad daylight. They didn't ask for money. They didn't make demands. They just took him. And Dad said something earlier. Something weird. I stood up and walked back to Dad's room. He was still resting, his face drawn, his chest rising and falling unevenly. I shut the door gently and sat beside him. Naomi followed and stood near the window. Dad, I said quietly, I need you to wake up. His eyes opened slowly. He looked at me, then at Naomi, and gave a weak smile. Is Luca back? I froze. How did you know? He sighed. I heard you. Outside the door earlier, the nurse talking. I felt a surge of anger. Why didn't you say something? Because I didn't want it to be true. I leaned in. Dad, someone took him. They texted me. They said not to call the police. I need you to tell me everything, now. He turned his head toward the ceiling. Years ago, before you were born, I worked at a state psychiatric facility. I wasn't always a contractor. I used to be a nurse. It was hard work. One of the patients was a young woman named Delora Vane. She had severe delusions. She believed the state stole her baby. I looked at Naomi, then back at him. Did they? The child never existed, but Delora believed he did. She said the system took her son and placed him in a foster home. She would scream and cry every day, demanding to know where he was. I was assigned to her for a while. I tried to help, but she became obsessed with me. She said I reminded her of someone. I didn't think much of it. But when I testified that she was a danger to herself and others, they transferred her to a secure ward. She told me I'd pay for it one day. I stared at him. Why didn't you ever tell us this? Because I thought she was gone. She was institutionalized. That was almost 30 years ago. What if she got out? What if she found you again? Naomi stepped forward and mistook Luca for the baby she thinks she lost. Dad closed his eyes. She used to say that her son would come back to her, that he'd find her. She kept a scrapbook of baby photos that weren't even hers. It was all in her head. I stood up. She's not waiting anymore. She came looking. I pulled out my phone. There was a new message. Come alone. 394 Stillwater Lane. No cops, no tricks, or you won't see him again. I showed Naomi. She immediately started typing something into her phone. That's 2 towns over, she said. It's rural. Dead zone for service. I felt the decision settle like a stone in my chest. I'm going, alone. Naomi grabbed my arm. You can't just walk in there. I'm not going unprepared. I want you to track me. I'll leave this second phone with you, share my location, and text updates if I can. What if you lose signal? Then you follow me anyway. I turned to Dad. This started with you, but I'm going to end it. And I meant it. I would bring my son home, with or without help. Stillwater Lane was more of a gravel road than a real street. My tires crunched over broken rocks as I turned off the highway and followed the directions from the text. I drove past rows of bare trees and decaying fences. The sky was overcast, casting everything in gray. My heart pounded steadily as I gripped the steering wheel tighter, every nerve on edge. I had memorized the satellite map Naomi sent me. There was only one structure out here, a rundown farmhouse surrounded by woods. No neighbors, no cameras, no help. I parked my car about 100 yards from the house, tucked behind a line of trees. I left the engine running just in case, turned off my headlights, and slid out as quietly as I could. My phone was in my jacket pocket, set to vibrate, with location sharing activated. I sent Naomi one final message: "I'm here." Then I turned on silent mode and tucked it away. The air smelled like damp soil and rotting wood. Every sound felt amplified. Twigs snapping under my boots, the wind brushing dead leaves against the porch. The farmhouse looked abandoned, paint peeled from the siding. One shutter hung loose by a single rusted hinge. The front door stood slightly ajar. I stepped up carefully, trying not to breathe too loudly. Then I heard it. A child's voice, software, muffled. "Rexy, stop it. You're not funny." My chest tightened. That was Luca. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The inside was worse than the outside. The floor creaked beneath me. The walls were yellowed and stained. A broken lamp lay in the middle of the hallway. Dust floated in the air. It smelled like mold and something else. Something sour. I followed the sound of Luca's voice up the stairs, each step groaning beneath my weight. When I reached the second floor, I paused. There were 3 doors. The voice was coming from the far right. I inched closer and pressed my ear against the wood. "She said you were my mommy," Luca was saying. "But you're not. You don't smell like mommy." I swallowed hard, then opened the door. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Luca sat on the edge of a mattress on the floor, Rexy clutched in one hand. A woman sat beside him, brushing his hair with her fingers. Her clothes were old-fashioned and hung off her like they didn't belong to her. Her gray-streaked hair was tied into braids, and her eyes were glassy, unfocused. She looked up when she saw me. For a second, her expression didn't change. Then a slow, sad smile spread across her face. "You came," she said. I didn't speak. I went to Luca and knelt in front of him. He blinked at me, confused but calm. "Mommy?" he said, reaching for me. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. "I'm here. You're okay now." The woman stood slowly, like she was waking from a dream. She didn't raise her voice or move toward me. She just looked down at us and spoke in a voice that cracked under the weight of something long buried. "I used to sit in a room like this, waiting, day after day. They told me my baby wasn't real, that I made him up, but I didn't. I know I didn't." I kept my eyes on her. "What's your name?" "Delora." "Delora, this is my son. His name is Luca. He's not yours. He never was." She looked down at her hands, confused. "He called me Mommy. He's 6. He was scared?" Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't lash out. She didn't argue. Her body sagged as if someone had let the air out of her. "I just wanted someone to stay," she whispered. "I understand," I said quietly, "but you can't take someone else's child to fill that hole." She didn't move as I stood and lifted Luca in my arms. She didn't try to stop us. She just stood there in silence as we backed out of the room. I carried Luca down the stairs, whispering to him that everything would be okay. When we reached the porch, I saw Naomi's headlights through the trees. She had followed the signal, just like we planned. I ran the rest of the way with Luca in my arms. Naomi threw open the passenger door and I climbed in. She didn't ask questions. She just stepped on the gas and drove. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house. Delora stood in the doorway, small and still, like a woman stuck in a memory. Luca rested his head on my chest. "That lady was nice, but weird. She kept saying I was her baby." "I know," I said. She was very confused. "But you're safe now." He held Rexy tighter. "Are we going home?" "Yes," I told him. "We're going home." The morning after we brought Luca home, I sat on the edge of his bed and watched him sleep. He looked peaceful, curled under his dinosaur blanket with Rexy tucked tightly under his arm. His chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. For a moment, the fear that had taken over every part of me was quiet. But it hadn't left. It sat just beneath the surface, waiting for any reason to rise again. I hadn't slept. My body was safe at home, but my mind was still back in that farmhouse, still standing in that dim room with the woman who thought my son belonged to her. Every word she said echoed in my head. Every image of Luca sitting beside her, unsure and quiet, made me sick. Later that day, I went back to the hospital. I needed to tell my father what happened. When I walked into his room, he looked up at me with tired eyes that seemed older than they had the day before. "He's safe," I said. "I brought him home." My dad let out a shaky breath and closed his eyes for a second. "Thank you." "She didn't hurt him," I said. "She was lost, but not violent. She didn't know what she was doing." He nodded slowly. Delora always lived in a world no one else could see. That's what made her dangerous. Not because she wanted to cause pain, but because she believed too deeply in something that wasn't there. I sat beside him. "You should have told us. You should have warned me." "You're right," he said. "I spent so much time trying to forget what I saw in that place. All the people no one else wanted to think about. I buried it all, hoping it would never resurface. I thought I left it behind." "But it didn't stay behind," I said. "It came looking for us." My father nodded again. "And it cost you something I never wanted to take, your safety, Luca's innocence." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I reached out and took his hand. We brought him back. That's what matters. For the first time in weeks, I saw tears in my father's eyes. He squeezed my hand, and I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen before. Peace. As if finally acknowledging the past gave him permission to rest. That night, I tucked Luca into bed again. After brushing his teeth, he sat on the floor playing with his dinosaurs like nothing had happened. "Mommy?" he asked. "Yes, baby?" Why did that lady think I was her kid? I sat down beside him and picked up one of the toys. Sometimes people hurt for so long that they start to believe things that aren't real. She lost something, and it made her forget what was true. She thought finding you would fix it. But I told her I wasn't her kid. "I know," I said. "You were very brave." He paused, then said, "I wasn't scared." I looked at him and smiled. Maybe not then, but I was. I was so scared. I would have done anything to find you. He leaned his head on my arm. "But you did find me." "Yes," I whispered, "and I always will." In the days that followed, the police found Delora where we left her. She didn't run. She didn't resist. She sat on the porch of that crumbling farmhouse and waited. She was arrested without incident and taken into custody. A social worker told me she hadn't been in the system for years. She'd been living under different names, moving from place to place, holding on to that same story like it was her only lifeline. It still shocks me how close we came to losing him, how quickly normal turned into nightmare. I look at Luca differently now, not because he changed, but because I know how fragile everything really is. One moment of trust, one decision, and everything can fall apart. People tell me I was strong, that I kept it together. But the truth is, I wasn't thinking about being strong. I was thinking about my son. I was thinking about how nothing mattered more than bringing him home. I learned something in all of this. The past doesn't disappear just because we walk away from it. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it circles back and forces you to face it. But it doesn't get to decide who you become. That part is yours. I don't know what will happen to Delora. I don't know if she'll ever understand what she did or why. But I know I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because carrying that pain forward wouldn't help me or Luca. He needs a mother who's whole, not one who's haunted. And I'm choosing to be whole. For him. For me. For whatever comes next. If this story moved you, or if you're a parent who would do anything to protect your child, please like the video. It helps more people find stories that matter. Share it with someone who would drop everything for their family. And if you want more true, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one, hit subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss a moment. Comment below. What would you have done in Raylan's shoes? Have you ever had a moment where everything changed in an instant? Your voice matters here. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Hold your loved ones close.